Should we put an end to IP? Absolutely. That's always the answer. That's the answer to so many things. Nobody wants to talk about that either. Ooh, scary.
Power on.
Real-time Sovryn is go.
Oh, man, it's tomorrow. Savzu, the rated R radio star, Dr. Brian Sovryn, here with you for another real-time Sovryn. And this is, I want to talk about something that I've actually threatened that I would talk about in previous recent episodes, that I wanted to discuss the recent law. Now, I'm an anarchist. I don't really give a shit about laws. Okay. But the recent law passed in California, signed by, of course, Governor Gavin Newsom, yippity-dee-da-day, AB 2426 is the name of the law. And what this law effectively does is it requires digital storefronts, right? E-shops, whatever, take your pick of what name, Sony slaps on the PlayStation Store or any other company, Ubisoft, you take your pick, that these stores can no longer use the language buy or purchase, along with other terms. Anything that implies that somehow the game or video or whatever digital content you're getting, anything that implies that you own it when it's not something that you can get, that you can download to be permanently offline, say off of like some games on GOG, um, that you can't use these terms that imply that you own it. You have to use different terms. I don't know that I've heard or seen yet, and this just got passed at the end of September 2024, so not long ago. I don't know that I've seen it. The law doesn't go into effect until next year, until 2025. So I haven't seen any of what the new terms are exactly that they get to use, that these e-shops or digital storefronts get to use. But you know, I hear a lot of people, saying that this is, oh, what a big win. This is such a big deal. Like, thank you for providing this clarity. And of course, you have, the California Assembly, coming right out and saying that, we have to protect consumers, right? All of this, Now, I guess I get it to some degree that again, laws don't really solve anything. Never have, never will. Okay. I guess I get the sentiment. I don't know who exactly, like who were who were the politicians in California listening to about this? Like I kind of want to know, like, who are the people who are like, oh, I can't believe this. Like, was it just like the politicians' kids who were gamers and were pissed that, like Ubisoft was delisting and removing from accounts at that, for that matter, like copies of The Crew, the game The Crew, which, let's be clear on this. There is a big difference between delisting something, as in making it no longer available to be purchased, and then, as compared to what Ubisoft was doing, where they were completely removing the game from accounts so that, like, you couldn't download it even if you did buy it, previously. Okay. Um, Again, I really want to meet the people who somehow were calling their Congress critters, and saying, "Oh, I can't believe this is happening." You got to go after Sony, you got to go after Ubisoft, or whatever company that happens to be. I mean, I noticed the language around Nintendo isn't exactly here. And Nintendo has an eShop just like everyone else, and they can delist and remove things from accounts. Maybe a more recent example for them would be when Shin Megami Tensei 5 ended up, great game, ended up a new version. It was originally a Nintendo Switch exclusive. Then it was no longer an exclusive, and a whole new version of the game with basically like a whole other game games worth of content tacked onto it. Got released for Steam and PlayStation, I believe, and also it did get re-released for the Switch. But then the original version, which by the way I owned a copy of, um, was completely delisted, removed. Um, so it's not like Nintendo doesn't do this too. Let's be fair here. Even though I consider, like, if there was one, oh, we could get into copyright. The way that Nintendo like pulls out the copyright hammer on everybody is atrocious, no doubt. But like, if there was one, like tech company that I was like, yeah, I think they're the good guys, it would be Nintendo, and they'd pretty much stand alone in that. As far as like more major tech companies, we could talk about a bunch of like little companies or startups or whatever who are doing just amazing stuff, doing the Dark Lord's work, and I love them. But as far as like the bigger names, Nintendo is one that would come to fore, even when they come out with $100 alarm clocks. Which, okay, again, this is going to apply to like any digital content, games, movies, music, ebooks, which that's going to get pretty interesting because Amazon's pretty notorious for this, for removing ebooks and then literally removing them from people's Kindles. So we'll see how that goes. Now, this is only going to affect California, California residents. Like if you're living in California, when you go to these storefronts, when you go to these digital storefronts, the button will be a different button than it will be in the rest of the world. Will the rest of the world ever pick up on this and, like share this language and or change this language across the board? Probably not. Um, Again, I know I keep saying this, but I really want to meet the people you know, who are clamoring for this. Like, what does that person look like? I don't know. Okay. I want to say they look like an idiot because the reality is so like to say that this is a win for consumers, like to quote one of my favorite lines from Tom Cruise's original Mission Impossible movie, relax, Luther, it's far worse than you think. And that's the reality. Like this is nothing. Okay. I guess maybe there are a lot of people over the age of 60 who don't realize this. I don't know that there are that many people under that age. Maybe if they're under 6 years old. So if you're under six or over 60, maybe you don't know this. Maybe I'm because again I'm baffled that people did not understand that that's how this whole thing works. But if you are, I guess this is somehow helpful for you, and maybe that's people of that age are the only ones that actually live in California anymore. I don't know. But here's the deal. Okay, the deal is that this is ultimately meaningless. Okay, and to somehow say that this is like a win for physical media, which that's the other thing that I am hearing and reading from many people. Um, also, that's where I see the real lack of understanding. Because these people, oh yeah, they get it. They know that, well, the game I bought on Steam could get delisted, could get completely removed, or it's not available to download anymore. Servers get shut down on MMOs. You go down the list of it. They understand it. This has been going on for over 15 years now. I mean, digital storefronts existed before then, of course, but that's I like to think that around 2010 was really when to me, talking about video games anyway. The real first digital storefront, I know it wasn't the first one, but I'm just saying the real first digital storefront was Steam, right, by Valve. And, around 2010, 2011, I mean, that's when I actually switched over to realizing, okay, no, buying games digitally, that's how this is going to work going forward. Why? Because I bought the, big collector's edition of Duke Nukem Forever. Shut up, don't laugh. The game's amazing. Okay, seriously, especially on PC. The only valid argument anybody had against that game was the load times on the Xbox 360, and well, that's on you. Uh, on PC, that was not a problem. So anyway, when I bought it, and it fucking came. I still have it. It's directly to my right. It came with two discs, DVDs to install that fucking game. But what did it do? Like when I got home from the midnight launch, okay, um, I put in the Steam code, which is required. Okay, I put in the Steam code, and it downloaded it from Steam servers. And I planned on playing it like the instant I got home. Nope, that was an overnight download at the time, baby, because it was like 8 gig or something. Like the DVDs that I got were absolutely meaningless. Not only that, but I mean, and this part's been true for PC games for a very long time, but there were consistent updates that there those updates are not on the DVD, never will be, can't be. They're finalized for fuck's sake as discs. And that's basically when I caved on that. Okay. I haven't caved on everything digitally, and I'm going to get into this in a minute because this is going to get to the point where you realize, oh, it's actually much worse than you think. Okay. But music, like I've caved into that. Yeah, we're going to do that digitally. Like the iPod just proved, like this is the best way to have music, right? Now with music, uh, I buy albums on Bandcamp. I buy albums on Amazon Music, okay, which are really, and sometimes even on iTunes. I mean, and iTunes is, 1.5 feet in the grave, okay. Um, but those are like basically the only valid stores that you can really buy from. And look, a lot of people put out music. You couldn't buy it if you wanted to. You could even email them or message them on message the artist on Instagram. Hey, I want to pay you for MP3 copies. They won't fucking do it. Believe me, I've tried. So, of course, what do I do? Well, I open up 4K downloader, and a great reason to have a YouTube Music subscription is because YouTube treats everything, whether it's music or video, it treats it all as it uses the same distribution, content delivery. So you can just copy an entire album as a playlist, put it into a YouTube download software, whatever one you happen to use. Okay. And boom, 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 boom. You can instantly download, high quality versions. I mean, not FLAC. Okay. You're not getting, lossless, but if you're into lossy, which I am, you download lossy versions of that album, and they sound great, as good as any MP3 I could buy on Amazon or Bandcamp. But the reality is, look, if I love your music so much, like I'll give you the money for it. Okay, but again, a lot of times you can't. You couldn't give them money if you wanted to, and that's almost an inverse problem to what this California law is actually trying to address. Now, look, the reason, okay, that music, I think, is at its best in the digital format. One is there's so much music, to have. Like if I had CDs of all of the albums that I have, even just the ones that I've actually been able to pay for, um, my house couldn't hold it. It just couldn't. Pick your format: vinyl, audio cassette, which is fucking awesome and tiny. I mean, maybe if we had mini discs still, maybe that wouldn't fill up my whole house, but the CDs would take up entire walls, right? And there's not, in my opinion, now I know there's a lot of different ways to listen to music, and I'm a huge fan of Dolby Atmos. Like I get all of this, okay. But at the end of the day, like the way that I've experienced most of the music that I want to listen to, which has come out over the decades, you know, an MP3 is going to do just fine and dandy. Okay, and again, the iPod for owning music like really showed. I mean, you had to be there. Okay, like with audio cassettes, there were albums growing up, me growing up in the 80s and 90s. that I would listen to so much. Okay. Um, and just the nature of Walkmans at the time, right? Audio cassette Walkmans. The heads get dirty or whatever, and eventually, like you know, tape is what it is. Magnetic tape, that an audio cassette uses, like, and that even video cassettes use, like, they are what they are. They stretch over time as you play them, and if you play them over and over again, I mean, you're screwed. Now the CD, not much better off. Okay, sure, like the tape doesn't get eaten, heads don't get dirty. I mean, you could say you need to clean the laser here and there, maybe. Okay, but not a very portable format, not a very portable, durable format like the audio cassette was. Like, I mean, you could like run over audio cassettes and they would still work. It was only the magnetic tape that would stretch and, eventually, um, again, the tape could get eaten and maybe you could straighten it out. You break out the pencil and respool it and all that. I mean, those who were there, we know. The iPod, gave us the best way to protect our purchases of music, right? And to carry around a lot of music. That was just such a truly revolutionary product. There's just no other way to put it. Okay. Now with video games, let's talk about that. Books, real quick, ebooks, that is a completely separate subject. That is such a complex subject to get into. Um, as to where, like, was there some kind of an improvement over ebooks, over the paper book? I would actually argue you want both. Like, both should exist concurrently for all time. Okay. But with music, I don't feel that way. Uh, with video games, this one, this is one that over time, I feel like the answer ultimately has come to that, digital is fine, right? Like having them digitally is really is just fine. Um, I mean, even I hate to keep bringing up the whole like having room, having space to store this stuff, conversation. But like that's a real conversation to have because it was one thing. Oh yeah, we have, you had, I don't know, 50, 100 games, or I mean, I know how many games came out for these systems. But like you say you had 50 or 100 games, per console in the 90s. Well, you know, unless you were preposterously wealthy, in which case you probably lived in a very large home, what, at best you had two or three consoles. I know there are many more consoles than that. Like, I mean, we could go down the list of them. The 3DO, the Jaguar, CD. I mean, I know by the late '90s, like there were just so many before the Dreamcast even dropped. Okay, um, okay, you had room for all of that, but now we're 7, 8 generations into into the console war. I guess I'll call it that. It's not really a war though. Nintendo won everything, but into console generations, right? Um, like where the fuck are you going to put all those goddamn games? Really? So again, it comes down to that. There's just so much now. Okay, so much of, and especially in video games, there's so much of quality that like digital versions of the games, like that's really the way to go. And also with advancements in storage and so on, like, I mean, having like the complete set of the hundreds and hundreds, or depending upon the system, over 1,000 or thousands of games, to have like all the ROMs or disk images of those is actually cost effective. It's something you can do, and you can do pretty inexpensively, right? And they, obviously they last a lot longer than the old cartridges do, or they, don't fall prey to all the scratches and scuffing, of your PlayStation discs and whatever else. Even though PlayStation discs with that black lacquer on the bottom, I mean, that was a piracy protection move, but it also made them very durable. Um, we could get into all of that, and game preservation is a very real thing and a very important thing. Okay. Um, but that's the point, is that like there's a lot of things where you can actually, I mean, ultimately what I'm getting at, we'll talk about movies in a second, but ultimately what I'm getting at, there are so many things that you can digitally own, and forget about legality, okay? Like you can digitally own these things. And it's worthwhile to do it digitally. Like there is an advantage, there is value to doing it digitally. And it's like the best way to go. It's not true for everything, okay? But for a lot of things, absolutely it is. Okay. And I mean that doesn't even get into this is so funny. Like the ramifications of this law. I have more I want to get into. Again, because like I said earlier, it's much worse than you think. But the ramifications of this law, how does this address, you know, like the argument goes that for you to have a downloaded ROM, say of, I don't know, Super Mario Brothers, take your pick of a game, that legally you have to own an original copy of that game. Okay. Now, it if you cared about laws, which I don't, but if you did, all right, the easy thing to say is like, well, yep, I have I have an original, 1987 whatever cartridge of the original Super Mario Brothers. So I can legally own the ROM for that and put it on whatever device, play it on my PC, play it on my smartphone, whatever, however you're doing it. Okay. Um, but then, this gets squishy really fast, especially with games getting so many re-releases. It's like, well, am I legally allowed to have that ROM if I own a copy of, the Super Nintendo release of, of the Mario trilogy, right? Of Super Mario All Stars, which is, the original three NES games put into 16-bit. Um, then do you own Super Mario Brothers, or do you just own Super Mario Brothers All Stars? Or Super Mario All Stars, like which is it? But then it gets even squishier, okay? Because like, wait a minute, what if you have, say you bought you bought the license. Again, what this law is all about is that when you buy a digital game, you're really just buying a license to access the game. Okay, so but if you put down the money, say, and this is just for the example. Right now, everything on Nintendo is is on the whatever the Switch Online, right? Subscription. Okay. Um, but let's say you paid on Virtual Console on the Wii or Wii U, you paid for Super Mario Brothers, the original one. Okay. Or you did it on the 3DS, whatever. But then, like, actually, an example of all three of those systems. But then, say the eShop gets shut down. Okay. You no longer have access to those games, but you paid for um, you put down the money for Super Mario Brothers. Do you have the right to own the ROM then at that point? Now, I'm sure it's somewhere in the EULA, the end user license agreement. I'm sure it's somewhere in there that somehow like it tells you no, you don't actually own the game. Like that language is probably there. I mean, this has been true, say, for Microsoft Windows, the operating system, forever. Like that language has always been there. You don't own this. You're just paying for a license for access to it. I mean, this used to be. I mean, it still is to this day, but even, almost 30 years ago, like this was one of the primary arguments to use Linux. It's like, well, you don't own it, and Microsoft could revoke your license at any time. Whether or not Microsoft has ever, taken advantage of that, for, I don't know, against something they considered criminal enterprise or what, I don't know. But they probably didn't bother just because it's so easy, even today, to get past, Microsoft's, like license removal strictures. So, and that's always been true. And again, it still is. Okay. Um, so, like I'm sure that language is somewhere in there that like you're not actually buying a copy of the game. And so technically you can't own the ROM. Um, and it raises the question then, is this somehow some kind of like long-term play on the part of, the console companies like Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, whoever? Is this some kind of like long-term play to make it to where ROMs just become wholeheartedly, or like wholly illegal? And you can take that either way. WHOLLY or HOLY, because I think illegal is pretty holy. Anyway. Um, it raises some pretty interesting questions. Because I mean, granted, you can make the argument that, well, yeah, I only paid $5 for or $6 for Super Mario Brothers on the Nintendo eShop. Um, but if I bought it back in 86, 87, that would have been $50, and yes, it would, unless it came with the system. There's a lot of gray areas here, but again, it's much worse than you think. So um, part of I mean, before I actually know it, let's do it. Let's get into talking about the movie part of things. Okay, I'm notorious for having a ridiculous collection of DVDs and Blu-rays. Now, I don't buy 4K um, for varying reasons that I'm not going to get into here. I've already covered that a million times on Sovryn Tech over the years, and I don't need to cover that ground again. If you're into it, you're into it. Rock and roll, have a good time, I guess. Okay, but I mean, I buy, I get new Blu-rays, for new movies that come out, and all that stuff. Like I'm all over it. Okay, I don't get that many anymore. Like this collection is something that again took years, to come to fruition. Okay, but the reason I buy discs, the reason I buy movies, uh, isn't. I mean, yes, part of it is so that I feel like I own them. Like that's part of it. But here's the reality. I know I don't actually own them, and I'm going to explain why. But just to cover the ground, the real reason I do it is I don't like to have to connect to the internet. I don't like to have to rely on the internet, honestly, for anything. But I don't like to have to rely on the internet to see something. Um, in a broader sense, I own it because Netflix can't just like remove the movie and then I can't see it anymore. You know what I mean? I quote unquote own it. And so I can put it into my Blu-ray player and rock and roll. Okay. Um, and of course, another big thing for me is I love special features. Like if it's a movie that I consider worthy of owning, um, there's two reasons I'm gonna buy a disc. One is the price is so good, how could I ignore it, right? Because, for example, like the movies, Blu-ray and DVD that you can get at at Dollar Tree for a buck 25, sometimes are amazing films, and most people forget. I mean, Dollar Trees had DVDs on their shelves since DVDs had been a thing, but most people forget. If you're wanting to pad out your collection, fuck man, go to Dollar Tree. You're going to walk out of there for 10, for $20. You're going to walk out with so many films, sometimes even TV series at that. Yeah, people forget. Anyway, so sometimes the price is just too good to refuse. Like I'll see a movie where I like, oh yeah, that looks cool. And it'll be like, or it'll be in the $5 bin or something, at Walmart or something along those lines. And it just kind of makes sense. Okay. Um, the other reason is because, quite frankly, I love what you did. I love what you made. Okay. And so I'll pay the price and and I want it. I want to have consistent access to it. Okay. So those are and again, and I want to see all the special features because if I'm buying your movie, like I love it that much, I want to know everything about how it was made. Okay. So that's those are the primary reasons that I still get discs. Quality is another thing. I mean, what started me on my recent resurgent path of owning physical discs really did come down to is that the quality of what I was downloading, either torrent or even what I was streaming, say on whatever streaming service, was often so horrible, regardless of how good my internet connection was. Um, that it was just like no this is not how the creator wanted me to experience these films or these TV shows. So I've got to do this right. And so you get into physical discs, but here's the deal with that. Even though I own the Blu-ray, okay, or even the DVD, and this is more true for Blu-rays and 4Ks than it is for DVDs. And the reason is that DVDs, like their copy protection, their piracy protection, was broken like almost instantly and is effectively meaningless. Okay. And so what I mean by that is, you can put on any, no matter what operating system you're running, okay, if you've got the latest version of VLC, you can basically put any DVD into a disk drive if your computer is fortunate enough to have one or you have a USB one. And VLC will be able to instantly play that DVD, no problem. Go through the menus, do the whole thing, not an issue. Okay. And again, that's because like a lot of the licensing and piracy protections that came along with DVD and DVD players, and that's really important, is the hardware here. Okay. Again, was meaningless almost the instant the DVDs were released. So, um, so DVDs aren't so much of an issue. Blu-rays and 4K, on the other hand, they're a whole other ballgame. Okay. The piracy protection is constantly changing on these discs, constantly being enhanced. Okay. And even a lot of the software that people would use over the years to be able to make copies or equally to be able to play Blu-rays, say, in VLC or whatever, software you happen to be running, that could play discs on your computer. um, there was always the need for constant updates, right? And there's a reason that Blu-ray, not DVD players, but I mean, maybe there's DVD players that do it now, but it's kind of pointless unless you're adding on like streaming apps or something to the DVD player, which sure, that's a thing. But Blu-ray players and 4K, UHD players, okay, um, they, have internet connection. Now, why is that? Is it for the streaming? For the streaming apps that a lot of these will come with? Yeah, that's part of it. But the real reason is there's constant firmware updates and license updates. Also, yes, for Blu-ray players, like there are often what's called it's called like Blu-ray Live, right? Or Blue Live, whatever it's called, where they're like features that you can access. You can use the disc as like your access point to some kind of content on some server and who knows where, that is like extra features, for the film. Now, I never really mess with those ever, and the couple times that I've even tried, oftentimes like the content's been removed from that server that you're supposedly accessing through, through Blu-ray Live. Um, but that's never like Blu-ray Live is never a make or break feature, of a physical disc. Okay, so who cares, right? I mean, I guess if people ever really use it, I mean that's almost dead. I don't know really any new movies that release on Blu-ray that will actually have that feature, or will have features, deliverable in that way. But I imagine they learned pretty quickly, like almost nobody was using this shit because, um, again, I mean, a lot of people I think don't even connect their Blu-ray players to, to the internet in the first place. Maybe they do, but. Uh, the content gets removed, and I guess people could maybe complain, saying, "Wait a minute," because this is kind of what they're complaining about with this California law. Wait a minute, I paid for this disc. This disc advertised that it has this Blu-ray Live content. Now that content's gone. What the fuck? I honestly, I've never heard anybody go crazy about that. And again, it's because nobody uses it. The content that I understood that was even out there was kind of meaningless and bullshit anyway. The good stuff was always on disc. It didn't really matter. Okay. But ultimately, and actually they give it to you like in big letters whenever you go to select the Blu-ray Live thing, with your remote. Like it'll say this content could be removed at any time. So like in that sense, they were warning you, maybe because they were worried that people are going to complain. But again, I've never heard anybody complain about that. Okay. And I'm still in awe that anybody's complaining so hard about the language on websites or, on digital storefronts that there's even a law like this getting passed in California. But like I said, this is going to get worse, right? And this is the deal. With discs, even with Blu-ray discs, which for many people is like the last holdout of physical media. Like this still matters to them, right? There's like if you go like on forums online for people who are really into 4K, into 4K discs, I mean they are fucking gung ho about it. And Satan bless him. Like I mean, really. Like I think that's wonderful that you're so passionate, and I'm not kidding. Okay, and a lot of times, like the 4K quote unquote move, the 4K community, they're so passionate and will put up so much money. Often, even though I don't do 4K, I get to benefit from that because, um, like they effectively, their interest in getting a 4K version of a film will often lead to a release of a film that never got a Blu-ray release, was maybe only released on DVD. We'll get a solid remastering, like a new 2K scan or something like that, that will actually filter down, because often enough when you buy a 4K disc, it comes with the Blu-ray as well. It comes with the 1080p version. And so I basically, like, there's times where I buy 4K discs, but it's because I just want the Blu-ray. I don't want the actual 4K. Um, and so, I'm pleased about that for sure. Okay, that it works out that way. But here's the thing. Okay, those of us who are into physical media, um, and this isn't, we're not talking CD and vinyl in the music world. That's a whole other animal. And again, I like I said earlier, I think that's completely fucking impractical. Like, like, there's no who who could, even if you only loved music from, like, say 1975 to 1995, like, where are you going to put all those albums? Where are you going to put all those records? I don't believe you. Like, no, that all gets into very, very weird territories. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being into this stuff. I'm just saying that, like, I don't think you have, how should I put this? Because, like, some of the vinyl releases, I mean, they're so gorgeous, right? I want to get back to the Blu-rays, but some of these vinyl releases are so gorgeous, right? And CDs, like some of these CD sets that come, like that Whitesnake puts out and everything, whenever they release the new mixes of their albums, are incredible. Oh, they're so good. I mean, they really are. And so I'm not knocking any of this. I'm really not. All right, but I'm just saying that, like, if you were of the opinion, or of the persuasion, that's what I should say, if you're of the persuasion, that, yeah, I want all my music on vinyl, like, you either don't like a lot of music, or I don't know. I don't know. Or do you have, like, a shed, a gigantic shed behind your house that's bigger than your house, that holds all, like, I'm baffled by this. Okay. So this is the area where I think digital is valid. Movies and TV shows is the one area where I actually don't think it's valid. Okay, like the more the digital. Okay, um, no, I mean, the digital, it's valid. I'm just saying that, like, you have a valid argument for having everything be on disc. Okay, like, there's a genuine valid argument for that. I mean, and I'll even buy, like, Blu-ray releases by YouTube channels. Like, seriously, and that's not even getting into the fact that, yes, I make custom Blu-rays of shows that are only on streaming services, movies that are only on streaming services. When I say I want everything of mine on disc, every movie and TV show on disc, yes, I fucking mean it. Okay, and I do it. So, um, anyway, but here's ultimately, aside from those custom discs that I make, or backups where I remove the DRM from them, and I do that often. I mean, because there's times over the years where I've picked up, like, a what comparatively could be considered an expensive set, Blu-ray set, and I'll just make a copy of the discs, and then I'll just sell the I'll sell the Blu-ray set on eBay, because I don't need, all I care about is having, the quality and the special features. Okay. And if there's a book that comes with it, I'll scan the book. Right. Um, but then I'll just resell the whole box set, because I don't need the actual, like, case. I don't give a shit about the case. Okay. So anyway, unless you're stripping the DRM or making these Blu-rays on your own, all right, when you buy official Blu-rays, here's the deal. Like I said, Blu-rays and 4Ks, they're constantly updating the piracy protections and just overall the firmware for the Blu-ray spec. And 4Ks are just Blu-rays. They have more layers. Okay. Um, and so the thing is that your Blu-ray player, now you can buy quote unquote cracked Blu-ray players. Okay. Like that's possible. Um, but you never connect them to the internet. Why? Because they'll instantly reach out for the latest version of firmware that's going to rewrite, um, or, for most models that I've seen, will rewrite the firmware that's on your supposedly region-free DDRM'd, Blu-ray player. And then suddenly, you run into problems. And this is my point, is that even if you're into, like, say, you think that you own movies physically on disc, and you're into Blu-rays and 4Ks, I hate to break it to you, you don't. Why? Because your computer software, most of your computer software, or your Blu-ray player requires licenses to be able to play the latest films, or the latest releases, I should say. And that license constantly gets updated. So you still, even though you think, oh, I'm buying a disc and it's mine forever and blah, blah, blah. No, because the software you use or the player you use has to have an updated license to be able to play, new releases. So you're just as screwed. Okay. Now, is this law addressing any of this at all? That, like, wait a minute. Okay. So if you buy from a digital storefront, you're actually just paying for a license, but it doesn't address in any way the fact that some physical goods require a license on the hardware that plays the physical goods, a license that is continually updated. Is it addressing that at all? No. And that's what I mean, that it's actually much worse than you think. Because most people's concept is, even people who, might somewhat applaud this law or something, they'll still come out and say, well, this is why I only buy physical. Well, newsflash, jackass. Your physical purchases are just as hung up, okay, on licenses as the digital goods you think that you're just renting instead of purchasing. And I haven't heard a single. I never hear. I never fucking ever hear tech shows talk about this ever. They never do. They don't care, right? Because I mean, and I could get into a whole separate diatribe about this, right? Because ultimately this just speaks to, and plays into, um, the fact that a lot of people, they only consume content in the background. Like, the idea that you're sitting down and, like, watching something is so rare. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it's so rare now. Everything is basically made to just be, like, Netflix knows what they're doing. The movies and everything they're making, it's just shit that is just supposed to be, that's comfortable, that's in the background, so that, people who are incredibly lonely don't feel alone, or that people, even people in relationships, who they never talk to each other anymore, they believe that they have some kind of shared experience, because in the background, okay, well, we weren't talking to each other, but at least the people on the screen were. Is that fucking pathetic? Well, of course it is. But that's a total side subject. Okay. So again, even if you think you own shit physical, you don't. And this gets into the other part that I've talked about many, many times over the years with video games. Because there's people who are like, oh, I'll only buy the game if it comes out on physical, to, like, today. And it's like, wait a minute. Like I said earlier, how, with PC games and with Steam, why I finally caved in is because, and I knew this already as a PC gamer at the time, for decades at that point, even in 2010 and 2011. Okay. When I finally gave into that, like, okay, PC games, they're going to be all digital going forward. Like, you don't need to buy physical PC games anymore. Um, is the constant updates, the patches, right? And that's not even talking about, like, expansion packs and shit like this. I mean, it's just there's just always constant updates. And sometimes it's updates that you really, really want, because it's updates that might allow it to play for, like a game that originally only played on Windows 7 or Windows XP, and you want to play it on Windows 10, or, Satan forbid, Windows 11. Um, it'll allow you to play it on that modern system. Oh, but I can just hit the compatibility layer. No, 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 that doesn't work every time, and you know it. Shut up. So, okay. uh, but this has become just as true for consoles. Okay, I mean, how many people have experienced where you buy the latest and greatest game of whatever for Xbox or PlayStation, and you went and bought the physical game, even perhaps from GameStop, and then you come home and there's a 100 gigabyte, not exaggerating, a 100 gigabyte day one update that you have to download. That's not a joke. Look up about it. You can, it's reality. So when you have the physical disc, do you really own the game? Do you even have the complete game? Do you have a game that actually even works and isn't like completely bug ridden? Now, I don't like that that's the nature of gaming, like that's where it's gone. Okay, I'm not a fan of this whatsoever. All right. I mean, yeah, I like that games don't take up as much, space on my shelves for sure. Okay, but I don't like but this is what I'm talking about here, this is more of a coding issue. Okay? This isn't that doesn't have to do with anything else. It's a goddamn joke. And how many games release DLC like on the regular? That can't be on the cart. It's still getting developed when the game gets sold, or on the disc for that matter. And they're not going to sell updated carts. They don't sell updated discs. Now, I mean, yes, certainly there's ways that this could be mitigated. It's not going to happen, but there's ways that it could get mitigated. And the solutions, have been around for decades, right? Like in Japan, you used to be able to, like, say, bring, your Famicom disc like to a store, and you could get the latest updates put onto that disc. Because what? Because a floppy disk is read write. Okay. And if you had a flash cart, it could be read write. And you could, sure, like your save game could be on there. You could put updates on there by going to GameStop and updating the cartridge and all that shit, but people aren't going to do that. And also to some degree, with the amount of people that are gamers now, it's not even practical. I mean, like, I mean, GameStop would love to have that many people walking through the doors, but I mean, it'd be a lot. So, and I'm not even getting into environmental stuff, which is a whole other can of worms because there's arguments both ways on that. Um, Regardless, okay, like all of these people who think like, well, yeah, we're really taking it to the digital storefronts here with this, and this is why I buy physical. Fucking moron. Buying physical doesn't mean anything today. And even I can admit that to myself. Now, yes, okay, with my Blu-rays and my DVDs, can I break the DRM on those and make copies, or run them in software that will play them because because I cracked the DRM? Yeah, of course I can. But most people don't know how to do that. And clearly there's not so much of a market for that anymore because I mean, again, like with the most popular software that did that for decades, actually, uh, or well, maybe not decades at this point, almost 2 decades, was any DVD, right? Depending upon what you want to call the company, there's always lots of controversy around that, but that's gone now. They closed up shop. And why did they do that? If it was profitable, would they have closed up shop? No, I don't think so. I think it's because they realized it wasn't profitable or they got bought out or whatever. You know what I mean? But it wasn't like the value proposition just wasn't there anymore to do that because most people aren't doing that. Most people just don't care. Most people just don't understand. And most people don't understand everything that I just laid out to you. And that's why they think somehow that this law is a good thing and doing something for them. It's not doing shit. Oh, these digital storefronts have to be a little more honest with you. Okay. But then what? Like you're okay with this? you know, like like you don't actually own it and you still think $60 a worthy price? Like talk to me about this, you know? I want to hear your arguments. Now, the argument you can make is much like the argument for going to see, a musical act in concert, even when, live shows are just as pre-programmed as anything you'd see on TV or hear on a CD these days, for the most part, not all, but most. Okay. Is you want to support the artist and you want, as much money as possible to go to the artist. So you spend $60 on, the new Zelda game because you want to support Nintendo. Okay, that's a valid argument. but then understand that that's what you're really paying for. That's what you're really doing. And if you want anything more, you better start getting comfortable with learning how to download games pirated wise. Okay. Maybe start coding and, you might have to start voting with your dollar against Nintendo because they're shutting down every emulator for any of their systems that they can. I mean, they're taking crazy legal action now. I mean, they can take all the legal action they want. Code doesn't give a shit about laws, just like me. And the stuff's all or many times is open source and infinitely copyable, and anybody can pick it up and run with it. So it's kind of like Nintendo's just shitting in the wind, honestly, when trying to shut down emulators. Like or like rogue game developers and whatever, like you can't stop this, not really. So but that's the future, that you're going to have to start getting comfortable with. This law doesn't change shit. This law doesn't do anything for anybody, because all it's doing is maybe pointing out part of the problem. Okay, but it's not actually doing anything about what some of you may consider to be a problem, like the idea that when you buy something, you own it. Well, again, really, you don't. And even if you think you're holding it in your hand, the device that you play it on has to be licensed. So, do you really own it if you can't play it? You tell me. So, again, relax. It's much worse than you think. And with that, I'll see all of you, woo, on the other side. The other side of what? I don't know. Should we put an end to IP? Absolutely. That's always the answer. That's the answer to so many things. Nobody wants to talk about that either. Ooh, scary. All right. I'll see all of you on the other side. Woo.